Ah, that should do it. Let's see. There we go. All right. Can you take a peek and see? Okay, let's see. I've got to put up some stuff here. All right, everybody, we are live. All right, so we got a bunch of things we're going to talk about here today. I'm going to go ahead and bang these out real quick. But first thing I want to touch on is the Google PR crisis, which, frankly, actually, I take that back. We're going to talk about the Jaguar issue right now. And for those of you who are not familiar with this story, essentially, Jaguar released an ad recently, which we're going to play here in a little bit, completely rebranded the company. And in doing so, they did not take into account at all what their customer base is, who their users are. So we're going to go ahead and play that clip now. Most of you are probably familiar with Jaguar as a brand, as a vehicle. You've seen the vehicle, you've seen the type of people who tend to enjoy and drive these vehicles. So let's go ahead and play that clip and see if this applies to any of those types of things. All right. Now, this may be the most absurd ad that I've seen in a long time. And the people on social media feel the same way. They're definitely letting the brand know how they feel. Jaguar is definitely trying to have a moment here, try to generate some controversy with frankly, a ridiculous ad. But it's not working. They are generating a lot of engagement, a lot of activity, but in doing so, they're actually hurting the brand because everybody who's coming and commenting on this is telling them what a stupid idea it is, that it doesn't appeal to their target market. And this is a mistake that I see a lot of people make where they'll do anything they can to get some kind of exposure, get people talking about them, get that word of mouth buzzing, right? So sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's bad. In this case, it's definitely backfiring on them. If you go to whatever social media platform you like to use the most, go look at the comments, go see how the public is reacting, right? When we're talking about Jaguar as a brand, this is a vehicle that's typically appealed to more affluent people. They're more refined, more reserved. This crazy, I don't know, looks like some cut scenes from The Fifth Element here. Just absurd that it does not appeal in any way to their target audience. So it's clear that this was a move that they did just to get a reaction. This is not presenting the image that they want. And I would suspect that give it a few weeks, maybe a few months, and they'll probably come out with a new rebrand. And this thing was just a ploy to get everybody talking. And then when the next rebrand happens, even more people are going to talk about it. And it likely will have a much better response because it's going to actually be catered towards the people who are most likely to buy that particular vehicle. So that's my thoughts on that. Bud Light did a pretty good ad that kind of takes the right approach. And this is interesting considering that not too long ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, but Bud Light had that massive PR crisis that knocked them from, I believe they were the number one beer in the country, knocked them down to where they're basically not even registering. Completely shook up that market and killed Bud Light as a brand for quite a while. Now they are trying to make a comeback. They did push out a few ads following that initial, the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing. They pushed out a few ads trying to go in that direction, not paying attention to the fact that their customer base is not into that stuff, right? That does not appeal to them. That's not what they believe. So they got decimated for a while. They've clearly seen the impact of that, and they've now put out a new ad that does appeal more to their ideal target audience, the people who have been buying this beer forever. So we'll go ahead and play that real quick, let you guys take a look, and you'll see the difference here. Go ahead and roll that clip, Chrissy.
It is not just a fragrance. It is a feeling. It is a passion.
What? Oh, where'd you get a snake?
We are all lost,
Yeah, I'm lost. I'm 100% lost here.
but we are on the edge.
Hey, all right. This is pocket full of snake? Yeah. Hey, I think I'm in the wrong commercial.
What?
Yeah, dude, this isn't right.
Wait, aren't you Andre?
No, I'm Shane. My name's Shane.
Huh. Oh, I see what's going on. You're supposed to be in a Bud Light commercial.
Oh, I'm supposed to be in a Bud Light commercial, not here. So that's why I'm the odd one out down here.
Well, if you're here, Andre is.
Love it here. Oh, yeah. Something is different about you, man.
I just ordered some wings in that other commercial. You think they're gonna make it here? You guys like wings? You blue cheese guy, ranch girl? You're a ranch girl. You guys like blood or something?
All right. So complete different direction, and it's definitely resonating with their audience. They're paying attention to what they're saying. So solid move on their part. Hopefully Jaguar learned something from this and makes some better moves here. So next up, we're going to talk about Google and their giant PR crisis. This thing's actually been going on for quite a while and has morphed and evolved and grown as it's gone on. But in a nutshell, the whole thing started with the DOJ antitrust lawsuit. During that lawsuit, they were coming after Google for its monopoly. Basically, it's got a stranglehold on multiple industries. As they got into the trial, they started finding all kinds of information about how Google was being deceptive or fraudulent, particularly around some of the stuff they were doing with the paid ads. User data was another big one. A lot of information was leaked. A lot of information was sold. In fact, there was a big story about incognito. That's the version or the mode of Chrome that you can put in if you want to go and browse stuff and not track any history, right? We also call this porn mode. But essentially, Google had always presented that as, hey, this is completely private. Nobody can access anything. It doesn't connect to you. Turns out that Google has been connecting all of the data going through incognito mode still to the user, and that's data that they're selling. So all of this, all of the things that they've been talking about, how they run business, how things are conducted on the back end, has pretty much been debunked. The other thing is the browser wars. Now, if you guys are older like I am, you may have seen all the DOJ lawsuits that came out back in I think it was the late 90s or the early 2000s when the DOJ came after Microsoft for the same thing, where Internet Explorer at the time was packaged by default because it's part of the Windows operating system. So they basically framed that as it's an unfair advantage. I think it's a bullshit answer in Microsoft's case. In Google's case, there's a lot of reasons why I would disagree with that and think that there actually are things that should be broken up by them. But in this in this lawsuit, basically a lot of practices were uncovered that really hurt Google's reputation. Now, a lot of it they tried to ignore, they tried to sweep under the rug, and initially it didn't really get a lot of traction outside of the SEO industry, particularly around the paid ad side. But as it started to evolve, then some of the leaked documents came out. And this is where things started to get really interesting because it proved that pretty much everything Google had been saying about how search worked was completely false. So they're out here giving website owners completely bogus information as to how the search algorithms work. And in fact, what they were telling them was stuff that would actually not work. All right. So they also, from some of the meetings that they had, there was transcripts about conversations where Google had talked about some of the things that they were doing and how it might hurt some of the larger brands. And the employees were like, well, we can't do that because, what if these big companies like Forbes or, Best Buy or whatever get upset? Like, that's their whole concern, is these giant companies. They don't care about the smaller publishers, everybody else who's, leveraging the web to run a business, right? To make some income for their family. They only really are focused on what the big brands are worried about. This really doesn't surprise anyone. For those of you who have been around for a while, you may remember there was a tagline, and it got removed in 2015. But that tagline was "Don't be evil." So I guess at 2015, that's when Google decided that doesn't really matter anymore, and they can just pretty much do whatever they want. But it got really interesting where the HCU, or the helpful content update, popped into place. And this is basically an algorithm update where that controls what shows up in the search results, where it shows up, things like that. And when that happened, countless websites were absolutely decimated pretty much overnight, right? If you go around Twitter, particularly on the SEO side of Twitter, where people are talking about, being impacted, or you see SEOs talking about it as well, you'll see a lot of the charts, the traffic charts, and you'll see, it's tracking along, then boom, just completely drops off, right? So this was something that initially, when Google started talking about it, they basically gaslighted everybody, right? It was, oh, well, if your site was impacted, it's because your content wasn't helpful. People didn't find it useful, or it's because you have too many ads on your page, or, numerous other bullshit answers. But when we look at, this garbage AI generated trash that gets published on sites like Forbes and all these other giant publications, right? Wired, I think Wirecutter was another one. There's all of these publications that are basically publishing content strictly for the purpose of driving organic search traffic to it. And then they get affiliate relationships out of that, where they're generating money that gets sold if anybody clicks those links, that kind of stuff, right? So Google's basically saying that all of these small publishers who are experts in their field, they're creating content about their industry based on their own firsthand knowledge. And somehow that content is not helpful, but the content that's AI gibberish, produced by Best Buy or Forbes, or, any media outlet out there, like Best Buy's got a website. Maybe they do, maybe they don't have this affiliate thing. But most of the media publications do, right? So Google has no problem with those sites ranking. In fact, they recently tried to pull a little bit of a PR move, and initially they knocked Forbes out of the search results for all of that spam stuff that they just recently claimed they were trying to clean up. But then immediately Forbes moved that into another folder, right? So basically all the same content. The only difference is now it's in a different part of the website. So everything's still the same except for where it lives, so to speak. And within less than 24 hours, they had all those rankings back. All the traffic was back. It's this big shell game where Google is basically destroying small publishers and propping up the large publishers, telling the small publishers, you can't do X, Y, Z, but then rewarding the big publishers for doing the exact same thing. And in many cases, the publishers who are literally doing everything right, they are an expert. They are producing original content that they've created themselves based on their own knowledge and experience. Everything that Google says that they want. and they're getting outranked by, some publication that's got some AI spun garbage that no topical authority, no expert. It's not even written by a real person. Like there's nothing about it that meets the standards Google claims that they're looking for. So people started to see through all of this really quickly, and they started calling out Google's spokespeople. So Danny Sullivan is one, John Mueller's another. These are two guys who are supposed to be the face of Google, right? They're supposed to be out here talking to webmasters, to SEOs, to marketers, to, other business owners who are, using Google's ecosystem, search, ads, all this kind of stuff, right? So when people started calling them out, started criticizing them for their behavior, what did they do? Well, if they were to do the right thing, they would have acknowledged what was going on. They would have engaged with these people. They would have told them how to fix the problem, all of this. Instead, they basically just gaslit everybody and said that the problem was them. Oh, you have too many ads. Okay, well, here's this site with 10 times more ads. Oh, well, we don't know why the algorithm didn't catch that, right? So it became pretty clear that Danny and John were both gaslighting everybody. They were not being honest. And when everybody started getting very critical of the company, they basically went and hid so that they wouldn't have to accept, the wrath of the public, which frankly was justified because Google's actions have run giant companies. I mean, not giant in terms of like Fortune 500, but companies that employ, 10, 20, 50, 1,000 people in some cases, completely out of business because Google has destroyed the model, right? Google took their content, used it to generate money, but now they're taking these companies out of the search results. So predictably, people are pissed. If you look at any of Google's social media lately, in the past, it would have been completely in support of Google. If the DOJ was coming after them, if some politician was coming after them, some major competitor was coming after them, the response would always be very much in favor of Google. But everything has taken a complete 180 because of how Google has engaged in the behavior here, right? So, for example, this was one of the responses on that tweet, right? Google was complaining about the DOJ coming after them. And a lot of these comments are basically telling Google, you deserve it. Nate Hake is another one. This gentleman here actually runs one of the large media outlets that was destroyed by Google. So he's pretty active here. He's been talking about a lot of the stuff that Google's been doing, but it's not isolated. You can go look around Twitter and you'll find hundreds of these where people are ridiculing Google. It's a little bit of schadenfreude, right? Google's been destroying companies for a while, and people are frankly happy to see Google getting that come back in return. So it's a really interesting time now. Pretty much all of the engagement that you see on Google, on any of their social media stuff, is negative. And that's something I've not seen ever. And it looks a lot like what happened with Microsoft back in the day, right? Microsoft went through this with the whole browsers war thing that I mentioned. DOJ came after them, tried to break them up in multiple ways. They did end up kind of making some concessions on both sides, but it hurt Microsoft and it did dethrone them. And Google's in that same situation right now. And really, it all could have been avoided if they actually went ahead and did the right thing. So we'll talk about in a minute what they should have done, what they could have done, and how that would have affected them differently, because all of you guys have the potential to run into kind of a similar situation. So we'll break that down in a minute. But one of the things I want to touch on before we go to that is that it's an interesting place because this is coming at a time that Google's already kind of knocked back on its heels. So you look at how AI is playing a role, particularly in search. Initially, AI was really exciting. Everybody loved it. It's going to be awesome. And then Google rolled out its AIO, right? The AI overviews, where basically it's taking everyone else's content and trying to make its own answers out of that. I personally think that should theoretically fall under copyright infringement, but the people in the legal space say that the laws aren't quite caught up with that. But when we look at this, we look at how people are responding. We look at how these other competitors are playing a role, right? And for those of you who have not seen the AIOs, basically, if you search for most things these days, you're going to find this little thing across the top of your screen where it gives you this AIO answer, basically. And it's telling you a summarized answer of whatever that thing is that you're searching. And sometimes they're okay. Most of the time, they're pretty horrible. To put it in context, in Google's AIOs for kidney stones, one of the treatments that Google was recommending was to drink urine. Now, I don't know about you. I don't have any intention of doing that. I'm pretty sure that there's no possible way that could cure a kidney stone, and none of my doctors have ever recommended that. But this is the kind of stuff that goes out there in Google's AI. Basically, Google as a model, as a search model, is completely broken right now. People have no trust in its product or the company or the staff behind it at this point. So this is coming all in the midst of this DOJ lawsuit. And then we've also got, people who are pissed off about the HCU. So right now there's a lot of people that are leaving Google, right? Whether it be, their ads, whether it be their products like G Suite, Docs, all that kind of stuff, and even search. So right now there's a new browser that just came out that's going head to head with Google, and that's from ChatGPT. So we're now getting into a situation where Google's about to get its browser broken off, and ChatGPT, which has been all over the news lately, everybody's talking about it. Whether you're talking about traditional media, social media, even people just sitting around face to face, everybody's always talking about ChatGPT. Now that they've come out with a browser, they can start gobbling up a lot of market share from Google. And then that changes the search results as well, because if people are using another browser, they're not using Google to search within that browser, right? Somebody who's using Chrome, they're probably just going to keep it set to Google. But if you go through the process of getting, ChatGPT's browser or, Firefox or, any other browser, you're going to pick what search engine you want. And if you're using a browser that's not Chrome, my guess is there's a 99% chance that you're probably not going to make Google the browser. So as that happens, Google starts losing market share pretty quickly. And if they don't have that market share and they're not getting that search volume and they're not getting that user data, they're going to start losing dominance pretty damn quickly. So let's talk about, not yet, back up on that one. So let's talk about what they did wrong, and then we'll talk about what they did right. All right, so as far as what they did wrong, well, first they lied, and they lied over an extended period of time, and they did that multiple times. Then when people realized this, they tried to gaslight everybody. They lied some more. They blamed us, and I say us as in the general public users, right? They basically went into hiding. I mentioned earlier how Danny Sullivan and John Mueller disappeared from Twitter. In fact, go look up John's Twitter account, X, whatever you want to call it these days. Look up his account and you'll see his tweets are protected. You can't even comment on this guy. He's hiding completely. And then they went and hid over at LinkedIn so that they could still talk to some people, but now they're pushing their little messages out through, their friends in the SEO industry, but they're still afraid to deal with the public. And that's a huge mistake. It just shows the people who are supposed to be your customers that you don't give a damn about them. So huge mistake on Google's part. I'm really surprised to see such a large company with what I would assume is a massive PR budget doesn't have somebody there smart enough to say, hey, guys, you're really screwing this up. So the other thing, though, is there was a situation, and I can't seem to find the image, but John Mueller basically said to somebody it was on some social network or Reddit, I can't remember where it was, but basically told the people who were impacted by this HCU update, well, maybe it's time to just, move on to something new, right? As in, well, your business is gone, just basically start over. And it's just such a tone-deaf message. And in conjunction with everything else, it's no wonder that Google's getting decimated by the public, right? Everybody distrusts Google. There's this level of schadenfreude that I've never seen before, where every time something bad happens to Google, and a lot of bad shit is happening to them right now, just people are rejoicing, and it's funny, and it's also well-deserved, frankly. So let's talk about what you should do in a situation like this. Now, you might be saying, well, hey, I'm not a I don't even know how much they made last year, multi-billion at least, not a multi-billion dollar company, but so you still can run into these problems though. All right. So yes, you're probably not going to have a massive DOJ lawsuit, but let's say one of your employees does something stupid. And then rather than fixing that with the customer, with the client, they go on and they lie to them. This is not outside the realm of possibility, right? This is something very easy to happen. And we've all seen it multiple times. So let's say that they lie to the customer and then eventually they just stop responding. I mean, we've all seen that happen to various companies online. Well, what would you do as an entrepreneur, as the business owner in that situation? Well, the first thing that you should do is you want to immediately announce that you're looking into it, right? So let's say that this happens. You immediately hear, as soon as you hear about it, you immediately go to social media. Well, first you'll contact that particular individual, but then you'll go to social media. You'll say, hey, this is what happened. Now, this is assuming, of course, that it's a big problem that is growing, right? If it's one person complaining, yes, don't go post something online. But if somebody is complaining about something, you address it with them. If it still continues to be a problem, then you have to look at whether or not you want to potentially make a decision on what to do here. But the first step is to investigate the situation thoroughly at that point. Now, you're going to figure out exactly what happened, who's to blame, and don't go into this with the mindset of my employee wouldn't have done that, or nobody in my team could have done anything like that. Like that's just not, it's not a smart move. You have to go into it with a completely open mind and look at all the facts and take that wherever it takes you. Once you know exactly what's going on, you're going to have to decide on what the best course of action is, right? So in some cases, the best course of action may be to do nothing. All right. I've dealt with a lot of PR crises, and when that happens, there was one I dealt with a couple weeks ago, and some things went sideways through no fault of the client. It was somebody else that they were dealing with that screwed some things up, and they were very concerned. Looked at the totality of the situation, and I'm like, look, here's where it's going to go. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. This is going to happen, and then that's going to happen. And obviously this person was very nervous, having not been in that situation before. But as it played out, everything went exactly the way that I said it would. And eventually it died off. So this was a really good example of a case where you don't want to respond, because had he responded, now that story's out there. It's public. Everybody can take from it whatever they're going to take. And often that's going to be something negative. So there are cases where it doesn't make sense to respond. In other cases, you may want to fight back. In fact, you'll probably want to fight back more often than not, because that's just our nature, right? Somebody attacks us, we want to attack back. And sometimes that's the right call. If they're making clearly false statements, if they're making defamatory claims, by all means, fight back. In fact, there was a really interesting one with the whole Matt Gaetz nomination thing. We're not going to get too deep into politics here, but some things were said about him that were not true in the way that they were presented by an anchor on The View. I actually wish I'd grabbed the clip here. This would be great to show you guys. But she made her statements. They went to commercial break. By the time they came back from commercial break, they announced that she had a legal notice to make. And she basically said that what she had said was not true. And I've literally never seen that happen on TV before, right? But that happened because this particular guy has been coming after the people who have been making false statements. So there are times when fighting back is the answer. And then, of course, the other is if you did actually screw up, and we all do, we're all humans, then you have to take accountability and apologize, right? The apology is the easy part. The accountability is the hard part, because you have to not only come out and say, yes, we screwed up, but now you're going to talk about what you did wrong, how you plan to fix it, and how you plan to make sure that they don't experience that in the future. Not just that individual, but the rest of your audience, the rest of your client base as well. So Once you've done that, you're going to take immediate action, right? You've got your answer. You know where you're going to go. Do it now. Don't do it tomorrow. Don't do it next week. The sooner you take action, the better impact it's going to have. All right. And then what you're going to do is that's when you announce your solution, right? You've already taken action. You're already doing the things to fix what you need to fix. You announce it. You tell people what you've done. You tell people what you're going to be doing and how this is going to work for them, how it's going to benefit them in the long run. And then from time to time, go back and check in on them, right? If you had a big screw up and your clients were pissed or your audience was pissed and you took the steps to fix it, wouldn't you want to check in with them every now and then? Reach out, send an email, pick up the phone every now and then and say, hey, we heard that you guys had these problems before. You know what we've done to fix it. How do you feel about things now? And that could be as simple as a post on social media, an email, a phone call. There's lots of ways to do that. But this does two things. One, it shows them that you follow through on your word, right? So they may have seen your announcement. They may have seen your statement of what you're going to do and how you're going to take care of them. But they probably don't follow you, every little detail. So they probably don't see the next post or the post about this or that, where you're talking about the impact, the outcome of what you've done. So by reaching out to them directly, you're showing them that you do truly care about them, but you're also showing that you follow through on your word, because here you are taking further action about a thing that really, for most people, would be considered already handled. It's already clean. It's done. Nothing else to worry about, right? But you're taking that extra step. And that goes a really long way in building trust with your audience, with your community. All right. So that's kind of going to give us an interesting segue here. Since we brought up Matt Gaetz during this, we'll roll to a little prediction that I made back on the 14th, where the Gaetz nomination definitely drew a lot of attention in the media. A lot of people were talking about it, both good and bad. And it was pretty much dominating the news cycle for several days, and still a heavy force, pretty much the whole time. So I predicted that wasn't actually the move. I had predicted that it was a game. It was chess, basically, right? And they were doing that so that they could then pull up and nominate somebody who is more palatable, right? And the idea here is Gaetz is a guy who's very polarizing. So you put him up and people are going to come out saying the absolutely most ridiculous shit ever. And so where it gets interesting is once he steps down and is no longer the nominee, they can put up somebody a lot more palatable. And when that happens, they're going to attack him in the same way, or her, right? Whoever it may be. And in doing that, they're going to show that it's hypocrisy, right? They're saying, oh, this is the most terrible person in the world, da, da, da. But you know what is being accused. You know the claims that they're making about that person, and none of those apply to this other person. So if they're now throwing the same accusations or the same attacks, whatever, at this other person, but this other person doesn't have that background, then it highlights the hypocrisy and basically makes all of their attacks ineffective. Now, this was a prediction that I made on the 14th. And then I believe it was just yesterday, he went ahead and announced that is indeed what's going on. He is not going to be the nominee. They stepped down. And then I think it was this morning, they did announce Pam Bondi, who was, I believe she was the AG here at one point. But again, they can't level the same attacks on her because that's just it's not an issue. It's not there. So any kind of attacks against her in that way are going to become completely ineffective. All right. Next up, we are going to talk about public relations during the holidays. All right. I had planned to try and get some festive little designs up here, but we ran into some tech issues at the last minute. So you'll just have to deal with a non-festive environment here. But this is an interesting time of year for public relations because there's so much going on in the media. We're closing out the year. You got the holidays, but then also at the same time, you got all the people who are working in the media. They're normal people just like all of us. So they've got to go buy all the gifts. They've got to get ready for their families coming in or going to their families. So the workload for the media industry at this time of year is pretty crazy. And then on top of that, of course, they're getting bombarded by more messages, more pitches than usual, simply because all of these other entrepreneurs, these other business owners, and these other publicists are trying to get, that last big push in for the year, right? So there's a few tips that we can use to kind of cut through some of the noise. And I want to be clear, there's no such thing as a silver bullet here. There's nothing that's going to be like, hey, this one trick will make you $5 million by Christmas. All of that is bullshit. But there are some things you can do to dramatically increase your success. So the first thing is we want to lean heavy on emotions, right? Boring, dry statistics, that's not going to hit. What's going to hit is those warm, touchy, kind of feel good stories, the things that really tug at the heartstrings. So I always talk about using emotions in your marketing, particularly in your pitches. In general, for PR, you can use any emotion, good or bad. At the holidays, though, just stick with the positive. That's going to get a lot more attention. That's the kind of stuff people want to see. It's the kind of stuff people want to share. They get into that kind of holiday mood, that festive spirit. And so this is going to have a lot better impact for you. And if you can tie nostalgia into this, that's a great way to go as well. But if you're going to try to use nostalgia with a journalist, just be sure to kind of look at how old they are and get a sense for where in our timeline may fall for them from a nostalgia standpoint, right? I'm 48 years old. If I started talking about, my Christmas experience, I would guess if I talked about my Christmas experience with some of my younger team members here, maybe their 20s, maybe early 30s, their experience with Christmas would be vastly different than mine because things have changed so much. So the things that might apply to me may not apply to them, vice versa. So don't just pitch based on your own nostalgia, but look at who you're pitching, right? This is a really important facet here. The other thing you could do is try some odd hours. So I like to get kind of outside of those normal windows in general, right? So I'm generally not going to email somebody at 9:00 because it'll probably be at the top of their inbox, but I bet most other people are trying to email around 9:00 as well. However, if I pop an email in there at 9:15, there's a chance that they're already in their inbox. They're already going through and cleaning up some stuff, handling some stuff. So now, rather than it just be sitting there, it's actually going to pop in when they're there, right? So that's an example. But around the holidays, it gets a little bit different. So what I like to do is get kind of outside of the kind of semi-normal hours. So maybe you do it a little bit after hours. You might shoot a journalist an email at 7:30. Maybe he or she is working at home on a story and it pops in, right? So you get outside of when they're already being bombarded, when everybody else is already emailing them. But look at that from the context of the holidays, right? People may be leaving a little bit early. They may be leaving a little bit late. They may be, have extra work to do. So play around with what time of the day you're sending those messages. And that may vary depending on the media outlet. It may vary depending on men versus women. It may vary depending on industry. So you're just going to have to keep some good data on how you're sending out these messages, these pitches, and then use that to kind of evaluate and refine what you're doing. Give you guys some perspective on what's going on with email over the holidays. All right, 116.5 million emails were sent on Black Friday. And that's more than any other single day. 106 million were sent on Cyber Monday, 95 million on Thanksgiving. Black Friday emails saw the highest number of opens and links clicked. And Thanksgiving actually saw the second highest number of emails opened and clicked, right? So this gives you an idea of the scope. So not all of that, of course, is going to journalists. A lot of that is promotional emails from vendors going out to their potential customers. But the point is there's a massive amount of email going out on that time of the year. So journalists are going to be getting bombarded. So you've got to take a slightly different approach. And then something else you could do is lean more heavily on social media. Now, I've always historically been pretty big on Twitter back in the day. Now it's called X, because that's where the journalists were. By and large, if you're a journalist, you are going to be on X, formerly Twitter. That is starting to change. I still think Twitter is tremendously valuable, but Blue Sky is where a lot of journalists are starting to move to. So what I like to do is I pop into various social networks where I'm connected with journalists, and I'll engage with their content a bit more than usual to stay especially high on their radar, so that when my pitches do come in, they'll be more likely to see it, notice it, and open it, right? And you can also gently nudge them on social media. But don't, I see people make this mistake a lot. Don't go out there and drop a comment. Like, let's say they just published their latest story. Don't go out there and drop a comment. Hey, did you see my pitch? I emailed it to you. Like, that's terrible, terrible PR etiquette. It's going to piss people off. It's probably going to get you blocked. So don't do that, but engage on their content more. And then maybe that will help you, right? It's not a guarantee, but it is a thing that I have found to be very effective. And this is something that if you do this consistently long-term, that really nurtures those relationships and helps you to build the kind of relationships where when you email them, they immediately recognize you, they open it, they take your calls, they take your texts, whatever, right? I've got numerous journalists that I can pick up the phone right now and call them and they'll answer, right? And when you've got that kind of a relationship, it's an absolute game changer. So look at social for some opportunities to further engage with the journalists that you're pitching. All right. And then one last piece of advice here is whatever you're pitching, if it doesn't naturally connect to the holidays, don't try to tie it to the holidays, right? So I see this a lot where people will just send out bullshit pitches where they'll say, hey, you should do a product guide, a Christmas gift list for XYZ types of products. And here's my product, which is great for it. Okay, but that journalist has nothing to do with, gift guides, right? They're writing about business, right? And that happened to me, right? I'm on the receiving end of that because I'm also a journalist in addition to being a publicist, right? So I've got columns at multiple outlets. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I have received a pitch of somebody saying, hey, would you like to cover this gift guide? And I've got the greatest exercise equipment ever that you should include in it. Like, I've never written about that. So that has nothing to do, with the holidays, right? You're just tying your product to a gift guide. That's not really connected to the holidays. A better example would be, let's say you wanted to go out and do some charity work. And you're going to go out here, like we've got this great organization here in Tampa called Metropolitan Ministries. And they do tremendous runs where they'll collect, I don't even know, I'd have to guess probably millions of pounds of food. It's absurd. I've dropped off some food to them several years, and it's like dropping off your kids at school. You pull into the parking lot of their facility, and you're basically going through this like maze of cars, waiting to drop this stuff off. It's a very, very large operation, right? So that's an example of something that would be newsworthy from a holiday standpoint, right? You're doing something to help people for the holidays. That's a valid way to connect it to the holidays. But if it doesn't naturally connect, don't do that. It's not good. It's not going to get you the story, and it's going to make you look silly. So that's a wrap for that. What I'm going to go ahead and do is we'll open this up for questions for a minute. I know we're not quite connected to all the questions popping into the system here yet, but if you guys want to pop into that QR code up there, that will take you straight in so that you can pop in here and ask us a question on camera. And otherwise, you can drop a comment in there, and Chrissy should see that depending on where it is. All right. So, Chrissy, are you seeing any questions here yet? All right. All right. So we're going to say none. All right. So that being said, we'll go ahead and call it a wrap for today then. No questions. Hope you all got some value out of this. If you did, I would love it if you would share this so that other people can benefit from it as well. And that will be a wrap for today. All right, guys. And if you want to pick up a great little tool, little resource, I've got this PR strategy workbook that we put together. If you hit that QR code, that will take you to our system where you can go ahead and pick that up, and it will send you a digital copy once you complete that transaction. And also up in the other corner here, you've got the QR code to join our Facebook group where we talk about this kind of stuff quite frequently. And that'll be a wrap for today, guys. Look forward to seeing you all in the next one.